Kita telah menikah selama 5 tahun. Selama 5 tahun, kau tidak membuat kemajuan atau pencapaian apapun. Jika kami tidak menerimamu kembali saat itu, kau tidak akan mampu bertahan kesuksesannya, sedangkan kau hanya bermimpi. Kau terlahir hanya untuk mengagumi mereka. Kenapa aku tidak bisa merendah?
Kau salah, Kaya. Manusia itu terlahir tanah, tapi aku masih bisa. Luar biasa dan berkuasa. Korai. Aku Leo Martin dengan hormat.
Tuan Owen, ada sedikit kesalahan dalam jamuan hari ini. Ada seekor lalat masuk.
Lalat? Seseorang yang mencari kematiannya. Benar-benar bodoh. Tuan Owen, Anda tak perlu repot. Naninya. Kalian semua sungguh berani sekali.
Tuan Owen, mengapa ayahku tidak datang bersamamu?
Jika Stephen ikut datang bersamaku malam ini, hal itu akan
Mesankan dari para pengusaha elit kelas atas yang ada di bawah kepemimpinanmu.
Tuan Ellis, aku siap bertanggung jawab. Aku akan menjelaskannya nanti. Tuan Ellis.
Ini adalah puncak dari 6. Hanya orang seperti Tuan Owen dan mereka di puncak dunia ini duduk di sana. Jika aku mendudukinya, bukankah menyebabkan kemarahan publik?
Tuan Ellis, silakan duduk.
Kalau begitu, izinkan aku mendudukinya.
Mereka yang tak menghormati Tuan Ellis akan bertanggung jawab.
Mantan menantu keluarga Clark, mengapa menghargainya begitu tinggi?
Diam.
Ayah.
Bodoh. Berlutut sekarang.
Ayah.
Martin tidak punya anak kurang ajar sepertimu.
Tidak, Ayah. Ada apa ini? Apa yang terjadi?
Kau berani bertanya padaku apa yang telah kau lakukan malam ini?
Apa yang telah kulakukan?
Ku abdikan seluruh hidupku membangun keluarga kita dengan susah payah. Kita hanya selangkah lagi menuju puncak kebesaran. Sekarang gara-gara kau biadab, apa kau ingin hancurkan keluarga Martin?
Aku tidak tahu, Ayah. Aku benar-benar tidak tahu. Ayah, tolong percayalah.
Pergi. Tuan Owen, saya Stephen Martin bertanggung jawab penuh atas segala yang telah terjadi hari ini. Sedangkan dia, kesalahannya tetetin. Tuan Owen, hukumlah dia sesuai keinginanmu.
Ayah, kau tidak bisa.
Tutup mulutmu.
Stephen, ingatkah kau kata-kata?
Hello, I'm Leigh McGlinn, and this is McGlinn Institute Neonatal. Today, in our Simulation Faculty Training Series, we'll talk about simulation-based training, curriculum design, and implementation. Designing a quality simulation-based training curriculum requires planning, critical thinking, and faculty that have the patients and the learner's best interest at heart. Deleting or skipping the critical layering process can result in poor curriculum design and ultimately an unsafe course for your learners. Moreover, it could potentially translate to poor outcomes for your patients. Step 1 for effective simulation-based training is to set your purpose, goals, and objectives. Remember, learning objectives drive everything. So where do these objectives come from? Well, they come from clinical observation, event report and sentinel events, patient satisfaction surveys. Within the hospital-based setting, a needs assessment with your RN, your advanced practice providers, MDs, allied health, managers, administration, and any ancillary staff. If you're in a teaching facility, utilize student surveys. Also look at your essential curriculum content. In addition, you can use core competencies developed for your profession, as well as previous course evaluations. Now, once you've gathered that data from your assessment, you'll find common themes. These common themes then translate to your objectives. Keep in mind, the objectives must be specific and should be tied to the data that you previously collected. If the learner stated they would like training on congenital heart disease, codes, hanging of code meds, or prostaglandins, this translates into a common theme. These themes are then translated into specific, measurable objectives for your simulation-based training curriculum. Typically, objectives are limited to 3 to 5 objectives. Objectives should then come from one or all of 3 competency dimensions. Cognitive, what the learners know or what you want them to demonstrate that they know. Technical, what the learners can do or demonstrate they can do, such as a skill. And most importantly, behavioral, which encompasses communication, teamwork, leadership, professionalism, and situational awareness. This conceptual framework was originally derived from Spencer & Spencer's Iceberg Model for Business in 1993. Listed here is an example of translating the previous common themes into specific, measurable, cognitive, technical, and behavioral objectives. Once you've determined your objectives, you can now set the purpose for this simulation-based training curriculum. Is it just education? Is it training? Is it for patient safety and clinical rehearsal? Is there a competency assessment that's going on? Or is it for research and development? Now, your curriculum design can be further divided into two types of assessment: formative and summative. Formative is what we typically see in education, training, clinical rehearsals, or training within the hospital setting. Formative assessments provide immediate feedback to both the teacher and the student regarding the learning process, whereas summative, commonly referred to as assessment of learning, is where the focus is on determining what the student has learned at the end of a unit of instruction, such as the end of a course or program, or to acquire or maintain licensure or certification. Now that you've developed your objectives and your purpose, you'll now need to decide how you're going to measure your outcomes. Is it going to be through a lecture, pre and post test, a skills fair with live demonstration, or simulation where you have a performance checklist? Or are you also going to look at real changes in clinical performance or outcome through your patient safety data? The next step is to define your learner groups and their expected level of competency. Do you have providers such as physicians or advanced practice providers, bedside nurses, allied healthcare professionals such as RT, ST, OT, physical therapy, X-ray, pharmacy, or lab? Are you training students, graduate or undergraduate? Are there techs or non-medical personnel such as child life, social workers, or chaplains? In healthcare, to determine expected level of competency, we utilize Patricia Benner's novice to expert model, adapted from the Dreyfus model of skill acquisition in 1984. Benner's model describes how a learner moves stepwise through the stages of understanding and performance. Although Benner's work was primarily focused on nursing ethics, the model can be easily applied to the physical demonstration of competency. Benner's model begins with a novice level subject. This is a subject that typically performs based on strict guidelines or rules. The model progresses through to advanced beginner and competent, at which point a subject has situational awareness based on experience and is able to begin leading and planning based on this experience. The model concludes with a proficient and finally expert subject. An expert is a subject that utilizes a rational know-how and performs without thinking about rules or sequence from a vast history of experience and theoretical foundations. Step 3 of simulation-based training curriculum is your curriculum design. You must decide what is the best format for your objectives, goals, and purpose, as well as types of learners and their expected level of competency. You can see here that Miller's assessment of clinical skills, competence, and performance from 1990 had each level of corresponding type of curriculum. If he wanted fact gathering or knows, he uses presentation or didactic. If he wants to know how, then you can do partial task trainers or skills fair. If he wants to see that they can show, now you utilize simulations or OSCEs. And does, well, that's seen in actual clinical practice. Most simulation-based training curriculums is a mix of all of this, using presentations, skills fairs, as well as simulations. You can also see that Miller incorporated multidimensional competency, described here as knowledge, skills, and attitudes, as well as expected level of competency from novice to expert. Even if you have only chosen to do simulations, you'll need to get your learners pre-course materials. It should cover what's covered in the scenarios through presentations, articles, web links, or even Skills Lab. And the learners need to have enough time to review this pre-course material before the simulation-based scenario. Now that our previous foundation is laid, we can now begin to step 4, which is scenario development. You'll start with a quality scenario design template, and then add on your adjunct tools such as your agenda, your pre-course assignments, scenario staging worksheet, performance checklist, scripted debrief if needed, as well as end-of-course evaluations. So how do you script an effective scenario? It is best to begin with a real-life experience. Next, you look at your objectives, cognitive, technical, and behavioral. Then you look at your learners' expected level of competency. And finally, you put it all together in your scenario design template. A typical scenario design template, again, has your targeted learners, anticipated duration of the scenario, a brief overview of the case including its description, history, and baseline lab values, and other background information for the learners, the setting such as the NICU or ER or delivery room, patient information, and again, all based on your learning objectives, cognitive, technical, and behavioral. At the same time, you'll want to include the setup such as room configuration, equipment and supplies, the type of mannequin you'll want to use, as well as any presets you'll want to program into that mannequin, chart contents, then expected interventions, likely progression, as well as endpoint. You can think also about miscellaneous things such as distractors or optional challenges, as well as actor or confederate roles, and any videotaping guidelines. As mentioned before, a wonderful adjunct tool is a scenario staging worksheet. This is a one-page worksheet that's utilized on the day of the simulation. It gives the location and setting, your actual room number, the intended location, such as L&D, NICU, etc., and your mannequin setup. Which mannequins? What wardrobe do you put on them? The monitors, are they on, are they off? The moulage you'll be using. Access, whether they have an IV, a UV, etc., an ID band, or other fine details to help those setting up the simulation do a better job. It's even great when you practice these simulations to take pictures at that time to put on the scenario staging worksheet. When you develop your scenario, you also want to think about where you actually want to run the simulation. Is it within a simulation center or in situ, which means inside the hospital area? Is it outside, such as a mass casualty? Or is it a transport scenario that needs to be run in an ambulance, a plane, a helicopter? Or is it more EMS-based and should be based in a motor vehicle? Next, you'll want to think about the mannequins that you have available and what is most appropriate for your scenario. Is it standardized parents or patients? Is it a task trainer? Is it a high-fidelity mannequin? What gestations do you have, and what can you use best for your scenario? After considering your mannequin types, presets, etc., you'll want to think about your equipment and supplies, such as your crash carts or procedure carts, transport backpacks, moulage supplies, radiant warmer or hospital beds, transport isolettes, video equipment, and the room that you plan to debrief in. Adjunct items such as x-rays, EKGs, the use of blood, etc., can add that extra layer of the suspension of disbelief that's needed to run the scenario. For example, you may want to add meconium, vernix, blood, etc. to your baby in order to help truly create that suspension of disbelief. Although it could be a presentation of its own, if you plan to use SPs or standardized parents or patients, they will need background information and scripts as well. Finally, you'll need to develop a performance checklist or find a valid and reliable instrument to evaluate the cognitive, technical, and behavioral objectives that you've decided for your scenario. Finally, you'll want to assign roles for the instructors or the simulation faculty. Now, there is the scenario director, content expert, technical expert, and debriefing expert. The scenario director calls the shots during the scenario behind the scenes and has content expertise. They are an essential person for every simulation. They understand the case and the desired teaching points and the clinical aspects of the case. They may or may not run the computer or be the patient voice. There are director guides and actors as well as SPs behind the scenes. They are going to huddle with those SPs before every scenario. They may use a wireless headset to stay in touch and make adjustments as necessary. All decisions are made by the scenario director, including when to end the case. Your content expert has relevant clinical experience with the material and debriefing expertise. They're essential to the design process. They can help ensure realism and flow. They also give expertise during debriefing. They can be utilized as an actor or a confederate and can be utilized to complete student evaluations such as performance checklists or formal evaluations. Someone in the faculty should be the technical expert. They have knowledge of how to make the AV gear and the patient simulators work together. The final but most important role is the debriefing expert. Not everyone is a good or even adequate debriefer. Practice makes perfect. This can make or break your simulation experience for your learners. Now it's time to practice before you implement it with your learners. You're going to program your simulator if needed. You're going to get the sim faculty together, and you may decide which can be on the fly or which needs to be pre-programmed. And again, practice those scenarios. The 3 key elements here are quality scenario design, practice, 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 edit as needed, and even practice your debriefing. Throughout this presentation, I have discussed each of the layers of quality simulation-based training curriculum design and implementation. Here's the outline that goes from defining the purpose, goals, and objectives all the way through practice and implementation. In this module of our Simulation Faculty Series, we'll discuss Introduction and Preparation for Simulation. Healthcare simulation is an attempt to recreate one or more aspects of medical care. Simulation is interactive. It can be realistic and provide immediate feedback for the learners. It can also help with outcomes that are literally difficult to teach or assess by conventional methods of education. Now, there's 4 main parts to simulation. The first is the scenario, or the immersion of a trainee in a realistic situation. And it is best written if it has been experienced by the writer. There's the simulator, or creation of a physical space and/or equipment designed to replicate real life. Next is the experience. The experience should be sufficiently realistic to achieve suspension of disbelief on the part of the learner. This is moulage, sights, sounds, smells, etc. And finally, the most important part of simulation is debriefing. This is a facilitated review of specific aspects of the simulation to solidify the learning objectives. Healthcare simulation has multiple purposes. It can be used to teach skills, take a history, do an assessment. It can be used for certification or competencies. It can develop team skills or leadership skills. You can explore using situational awareness or even teach communication of sad or bad news. The evidence to support healthcare simulation is vast. For example, in situ training on pediatric inpatients units improved survival after cardiac arrest from 33 to 50%. It's decreased medical error rates, decreased CLABSI rates with an annual cost savings of $3.9 million, and improved the depth of chest compressions during real codes from 70% to 88%. So how did healthcare simulation make all these amazing improvements? Well, they utilized the principles of crisis resource management, or CRM. They utilized teamwork or mutual support, bedside leadership, respectful communication using closed loop, SBARs, or callouts, as well as situational awareness. This includes your personnel, your resources, and your time, as well as professionalism and a flattened hierarchy. These behavioral aspects help ensure the safety of the patient. Remember, 70% of mistakes in medicine are due to human error, not a lack of medical knowledge, but a lack of teamwork and effective communication. It is important that the faculty providing the simulation understands in detail each portion of CRM or crisis resource management, where teamwork provides task-related support, provides timely and constructive feedback, effectively advocates for the patient, uses two-challenge rule, the CUS and the DES script to resolve conflict, and collaborates with team members. Whereas situational awareness includes patient and family in communication, cross-monitors fellow team members, and fosters communication to ensure team members have a shared mental model. In addition, crisis resource management emphasizes communication, where you can provide a brief, clear, specific, and timely information to team members. You seek information from all available sources. You verify that the information is communicated. You use SBAR, or structured communication, with situation, background, assessment, and recommendation. You use callouts, where you verbalize critical information to the entire team, or checkbacks, where you use closed-loop communication. It also utilizes leadership, where you utilize your resources effectively and efficiently to maximize team performance. You balance the workload within the team. You delegate tasks or assignments as appropriate. You conduct briefs, huddles, and debrief, and you empower the team members to speak freely and ask questions. Within crisis resource management, it is important that the team leader understands the difference between being the lone cowboy or a NASCAR team. The lone cowboy will try to do everything themselves and make themselves the center, whereas the NASCAR team type of thinking utilizes that every person around that vehicle, within the vehicle, the entire team is critical and important to ensure safety and overall effectiveness of the team. So now that you know the 4 basic components of healthcare simulation, the ways simulation can be used, evidence to support simulation, and how simulation uses crisis resource management to improve patient safety and outcomes, it is now time to transition into what is needed to ensure a safe learning environment for your learners. In a previous video for course simulation faculty, I discussed the layers required to create a simulation-based training course. This means that you define your purpose, goals, and objectives, your learners, curriculum design, scenario design, agendas, checklists, mannequin programming, SP training as needed, debriefing preparation, and even practice. Part of ensuring a safe learning environment is pre-course materials. Now, this material should cover what is in the scenario without giving the scenario away. The learners need to have enough time to review before the course. This could be a presentation, articles, web links. It could also include skills labs or computer simulations, as well as exemplar videos. In addition to pre-course materials, on the day of simulation, there are several items that help ensure learner safety. This includes an introduction to the equipment and supplies, going over the safety rules, consents, agenda, and orienting to the space and mannequins. In addition, after the simulations are over, having post-simulation evaluations. The faculty and the learners should know the breakdown of the day, what to wear, such as scrubs, where to go, in other words, where will the simulations be ran, the student group assignments, and how you'll be rotating the scenarios should there be more than one. These next 4 items are essential for a safe learning environment in a simulation-based curricula. They include the basic assumption, confidentiality, the fiction contract, as well as rules of simulation. Every student and faculty member should also be signing a confidentiality agreement. In other words, what happens in simulation stays in simulation. This includes not only the performances of the learners, but as well as the scenario content. In addition to the confidentiality agreement, it's also important to get learners to sign a consent to photo or video, as video debriefing is often used, and learners often appreciate photos afterwards. The basic assumption simply states that we believe that every individual participating in simulation activities is intelligent, well-trained, cares about doing their best, and wants to improve their performance. The fiction contract states that as a simulation faculty, we do our best to create an environment that is realistic as possible. We ask you as a participant to immerse yourselves in each simulation scenario in order for you to achieve suspension of disbelief and ultimately to perform as you would in a real clinical situation. The final core component for a safe learning environment that both the sim faculty and learners need to know are the rules of simulation. They include knowing your environment, anticipate and plan for crises, assume a leadership role, communicate effectively, distribute workload optimally, allocate attention wisely, utilize all available resources and information, call for help early enough, and always maintain professional behavior. Typically, there is a pre-brief prior to performing the simulation where you orient your simulation faculty, content experts, confederates on the expectations, safety review, mannequin, equipment, and supplies. In addition, all learners should go through an orientation to simulation in safe learning environments. Where the mannequin is concerned, the learners need to know what that mannequin can do and not do. Its breath sounds, its heart sounds, its pulses, if there's bowel sounds, cyanosis, what the monitor readout looks like, how it looks when they face bag, how it feels to do CPR, and even if needed, defibrillation cables. You'll want them to know whether they can start an IV, an IO, how to give meds, place an OG or NG, oral airway, or if the mannequin can be intubated. You'll want them to know if they can add liquids down the airway, put betadine on the skin or not, or mark or write on the mannequin's skin. You need to know your mannequin's capabilities as well as limitations and have a scripted orientation for the learners on the day of simulation. You'll also want to orient the learners as well as faculty to the room and equipment and supplies. For example, where things are, how they can find them, how to draw up meds, etc., as this may be slightly different in simulation than in real life. And if the simulation is not meant to be a scavenger hunt, it even becomes more important that you show the learners where things are and how to obtain them. That includes equipment, supplies, and personnel. During the simulation, you will have one of the simulation faculty completing a scenario performance checklist or scenario evaluation that covers the cognitive, technical, and behavioral objectives of your scenario. This performance checklist can then be utilized in debriefing. And finally, before the students leave, it's important that they complete a course evaluation so that you may improve your simulation-based training courses in the future. Now it's your turn. Please let us know how this simulation-based training video helped you in your actual simulation-based training curricula. Looking for a comprehensive NRP, procedural skills, or simulation-based training course? If so, McGlinn Institute has been experienced by the writer. There's the simulator, or creation of a physical space and/or equipment designed to replicate real life. Next is the experience. The experience should be sufficiently realistic to achieve suspension of disbelief on the part of the learner. This is moulage, sights, sounds, smells, etc. And finally, the most important part of simulation is debriefing. This is a facilitated review of specific aspects of the simulation to solidify the learning objectives. Healthcare simulation has multiple purposes. It can be used to teach skills, take a history, do an assessment. It can be used for certification or competencies. It can develop team skills or leadership skills. You can explore using situational awareness or even teach communication of sad or bad news. The evidence to support healthcare simulation is vast. For example, in situ training on pediatric inpatient units improved survival after cardiac arrest from 33 to 50%. It's decreased medical error rates, decreased CLABSI rates with an annual cost savings of $3.9 million, and improved the depth of chest compressions during real codes from 70% to 88%. So how did healthcare simulation make all these amazing improvements? Well, they utilized the principles of crisis resource management, or CRM. They utilized teamwork or mutual support, bedside leadership, respectful communication using closed loop, SBARs, or callouts, as well as situational awareness. This includes your personnel, your resources, and your time, as well as professionalism and a flattened hierarchy. These behavioral aspects help ensure the safety of the patient. Remember, 70% of mistakes in medicine are due to human error, not a lack of medical knowledge, but a lack of teamwork and effective communication. It is important that the faculty providing the simulation understands in detail each portion of CRM or crisis resource management, where teamwork provides task-related support, provides timely and constructive feedback, effectively advocates for the patient, uses two-challenge rule, the CUS and the DES script to resolve conflict, and collaborates with team members. Whereas situational awareness includes patient and family in communication, cross-monitors fellow team members, and fosters communication to ensure team members have a shared mental model. In addition, crisis resource management emphasizes communication, where you can provide a brief, clear, specific, and timely information to team members. You seek information from all available sources. You verify that the information is communicated. You use SBAR, or structured communication, with situation, background, assessment, and recommendation. You use callouts, where you verbalize critical information to the entire team, or checkbacks, where you use closed-loop communication. It also utilizes leadership, where you utilize your resources effectively and efficiently to maximize team performance. You balance the workload within the team. You delegate tasks or assignments as appropriate. You conduct briefs, huddles, and debrief, and you empower the team members to speak freely and ask questions. Within crisis resource management, it is important that the team leader understands the difference between being the lone cowboy or a NASCAR team. The lone cowboy will try to do everything themselves and make themselves the center, whereas the NASCAR team type of thinking utilizes that every person around that vehicle, within the vehicle, the entire team is critical and important to ensure safety and overall effectiveness of the team. So now that you know the 4 basic components of healthcare simulation, the ways simulation can be used, evidence to support simulation, and how simulation uses crisis resource management to improve patient safety and outcomes, it is now time to transition into what is needed to ensure a safe learning environment for your learners. In a previous video for core simulation